Welcome to the first tutorial on watercolor painting. Today we're going to be going over materials, what you need to get. And what I'm giving you today in this basic watercolor material information is I'm giving you the affordable side. You can spend as little or as much as you want. One of the papers that I do like to use is the Strathmore watercolor. I'm having a hard time fitting this in this space. This is a rather large pad. But Strathmore watercolor, it's reasonably priced. This is an 11 by 15 inch, which means you can do one painting or you can get a boatload out of this one sheet of paper. I also, at times, will use this brand, Canson. You can find this for a little bit less than the Strathmore, but again, real decent paper at a good price. You will notice with watercolor paper, when you go to buy it, check out what it all looks like. This is a very thick stock, and it does have a texture. Some papers have more texture than others. That would be a personal preference. Next up, we have your paints. How scary is this? This is a well-used palette of cake paints. They come in they're very dry cakes. This is a kit and it folds shut. You don't fold it shut when your paint's still wet. Lessons learned. It has these little troughs for mixing, but I like to use them for my extra colors that aren't available in the cake. These are tube paints squeezed in. Yep, they dry, and once you put water to them, they're wet again. Tube paints. Oh my goodness. Inexpensive, comes in a big kit. Good for the kids, good for people just starting out. Then we have, this is a Winsor Newton. And I also have Grumbacher in here. These paints can be very pricey. This one right here is a Winsor Newton, a Series 1A. And this tube was $9.29 for this little guy. But remember, watercolor paint goes a long way. A lot of watercolor artists out there, they have their favorite brand and they stick to it. Me personally, being a starving artist, I go with what's on sale. So I tend to mix my paints, my brands at least. If you go too cheap on your paint, you're going to get frustrated. That's why kids get frustrated with doing creative projects, because the materials, the supplies that are affordable for kids, when you have a bunch, are just, they're very poor quality, therefore they can become frustrating. Next up, we have brushes. I have lots of brushes. This is one of 3 jars. Good to have in your set, for sure, is a flat. It's got a flat edge. And I'm showing you the large one because they come in different thicknesses and different sizes. Some have natural bristles, some have synthetic. You'll notice on these, my bristles, they were bone white when I first get these brushes, and then they get stained. But it's okay, because if you don't have any paint coming out of your brush when you rinse it, it's clean. But these do stain. I'm looking for the name. It's kind of got paint all over it. This brand is Royal. I like these. They have a very cool lucite handle on them and this nice sort of rubbery, cushiony shaped ergonomically for your knuckle side of your finger. They're inexpensive. This is another flat, a little bit smaller. Another good one to have is, they call them a round. I call them the pointy brushes. Oh, this one's got into something that I didn't clean very well, so it's got a stiff area, but I can probably fix that. This is a rather large one. I don't use it very often. I like having this size down to, let me get where I can focus here, down to this tiny, 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 skinny one. That's really pointy. We're doing real fine work. A round is nice. And there are these flatter ones, but with round, the bristles are rounded at the top. Oddly enough, for multiple containers of brushes in this house, I don't own one. Apparently, I do just fine without it. I believe what I would use it for would be very similar to what I use this for. It's just, see how this has the rounded top? If I push on it, it's flat with a rounded top, not just pointy. Then you have all kinds of specialty brushes. This one's kind of cool. You can see it has a round top to it, but then it's got all these little extra guys. It's fine. It has like eyelashes coming out. It's very nice for doing fur and grasses, whiskers on a cat. Then we have this crazy thing. It's a flat, but it's got an angle to it. And the reason why the brushes are shaped with different heads, if you are painting something very linear, very square, and you want to come down the edge, you want the edge of your bristles to make a nice straight line. If you want to make a big sweeping something line, curly cues, then you'd use one of these rounds. The reason why this comes into play, where it's straight on the sides and it's a little bit of a curved chisel look to it, if I was painting flowers and the petals, you want to go with one stroke. You just want to put this down and bam, a petal, bam, a petal, bam, a petal. So the shape of your brush corresponds to what you are painting. But that's something we will get into later. Next up, watercolor pencils. I've used different brands. Again, rule of thumb, if it's really, really, really inexpensive, then it's going to be problematic to work with. So always go somewhere in the middle. And this is a huge kit. I've lost a brown. It's very sad. You can get a kit with like 3 or 4. But I will use these a lot of times when I'm sketching out a project, and that will come in another tutorial. If you've got kids and you don't like the insane mess that painting can bring about, you want it a little bit more clean and controlled, this is a cool way to go, because kids draw all the time. They can draw with these on a watercolor paper and then just add some water to their brush and go to town, and you don't have huge messes. These come in very handy, and we'll get into that in another tutorial. Of course, you want water. I have water in a plastic cup inside, let me get my arm out of here, inside a can. I put pennies or rocks in the bottom. That way it's very stable, because I have cats. You want underneath your water, I like just using paper towel. Sometimes using an old t-shirt or a cloth, a lot of times you get the fuzz from the t-shirts. I have a hard enough time fighting with cat and dog hair. I don't need to fight with t-shirt fuzz. So I use paper towel. Also with my paper towel underneath where I can rinse and dry off. I can see if there's any pigment left. I also like having a loose piece, which often gets torn into little pieces like this. As you see, it's got some paint on it because I will ball them up to do various techniques. And if you've got too much water or too much pigment on your painting, you can pick it up before you've destroyed your painting. Next up, painter's tape. You're going to want to tape your work down, frame it out in painter's tape. Painter's tape peels off the paper. Does it tear the paper? Sometimes, but I have a trick for that, which you will learn in another tutorial. And next up, you want to have just your usual, sponge. If I'm not using paper towel, I'm using a sponge. Makeup sponges work really well. I've got paint in it. I can just rinse this out and reuse this forever. If you're worried about well, not that you wouldn't be worried about the environment, but if you're working real hard towards having a less footprint in your watercolor painting, sea sponges work really well. They're very expensive, but if you check the makeup department at the dollar store, you might get lucky. Also, you can get a boatload of these in a package for $1 at the dollar store. I also like having toothpicks on hand. Toothpicks come in handy when you're working with the other thing to have, rubber cement. These two items are your friend. And just as a rule of thumb, funny, a ruler's good to have. White eraser. Don't go with those crazy colored erasers. The eraser will be left on your paper, the color. Pencil, ebony pencil, soft lead, regular number 2, HB number 2, soft lead. Not crucial, but I'm just showing you what I use. So let's see, I think we covered it all. So that's it for supplies. If you are on the YouTube page watching this video, and then you can get to Standing Stone Learning Center's Facebook page, I will have posted the supply list. As if you were taking a class with me, I will have a supply list posted, and you can always get a hold of me. Thanks for stopping in.